Okay, so now I have my Mplus input file open on the left-hand side and my slide open on the right-hand side. Now, when you want to write a model in Mplus and you want to write a regression path, you use a statement called on. And the way this goes is as follows. You would say outcome variable regressed onto the predictor, like so. If instead you want to write out a correlation, you would use a statement called with. And so the way this would go is variable 1 correlated with variable 2. Of course, when you actually write your model, you don't have to put this bit here. You would just have to put these two. By the way, Mplus also does not care whether you write everything starting from the leftmost bit of your screen. So everything could come starting from here, each single line. I like to use tabs because it more easily shows me which subsection I'm in. So when I want to quickly look at my file, it's just easier to have a look and figure out what's going on at a glance. So now we have these two commands here. Now let's have a look at our diagram. What do you think? What do you think this statement is? Just this one here at the top. On or with? Have a little think. Right, so this is a regression path, so it would be on. And how would that go? What would be on what? Have a little think about that. Right, so it would be child externalizing problems on stress. And that's how that statement would go straight in our model. Let's write it down. So we say child on stress. What about the other parts? What would this one be right here? On or with? That's right, it's on. What about the others? Have a go. So that's right, all of them are regression paths, so they all are on statements when we want to write them in Mplus. We don't have any with statements, but if we did, this one could be a with statement. How would that go? That's right, you would say stress with conflict, and you would literally just put it here like that, stress with conflict, and close with a semicolon. So you see, it's all very easy in Mplus. Now I'll give you a second to write down all of the parts that we have in the diagram, so obviously not this, but have a go and write the entire model out. It doesn't matter which order you write them in. Excellent, so let me write everything down, but first I'm going to annotate these two so Mplus doesn't see them, and I'm going to take out that correlation which is not part of our hypothesized model. Of course it could be if you had a hypothesis about it, but looking at that diagram, it looks like our theoretical model doesn't include one. So let's see, we would also have parent on stress, and parent on conf, and child on parent, and child on conf. Do you have all of these paths? Have a little look at what you wrote and see if you have what I have here. Now, some of you like to write it like as if you wrote the equation. So you would have the y variable equals, and then something about predictor 1 plus predictor 2, and so on and so forth. If you prefer that style, you could write this a bit more easily by just saying child on, and then you put all the predictors there, so you would have stress, parent and conf, and you could just then say parent on stress and conf. So you get to choose, either you write each path per line, or you can write it in equation style. It's up to you. So I'm going to delete this for now, because you shouldn't write it both ways. You either choose one or the other and stick with it. Excellent, so this is our model. However, we also have to write in the mediated parts. So in the past, it used to be the case that if the two parts of mediation, say this one and this one, are both significant, then you can claim you had a mediated effect. However, it is no longer sufficient. You also have to compute the actual indirect effect, which you would compute using this statement. Now, for our simple mediation model, Mplus has a really easy way to do it. You would have to use a subcommand called model indirect. And here you would have to use a different command called ind. So the way this would go is outcome ind mediator predictor. So for example, in this case, you can see that you're going backwards. So you say outcome, regressed onto mediator, regressed onto predictor. Now, looking at our model, how many indirect effects can we expect? That's right, we can expect two of them. One is this one in red here, and we have another one, let's write it in blue, purple. So it would go like this. So why don't you have a go and try to write out the two commands that would correspond to each of our two indirect effects. Right, so let's see if you got what I got. So for one of them I would say child ind parent stress. For the other one I would say child ind parent conf, because you always put the mediator first. Sometimes I'm asked, why can't we just say child ind parent stress conf? Well, that is a valid statement in general, but what it would do is, let's choose a different color so I can annotate this further. Perhaps green, dark green. So what that would do is it would take you from conflict to stress, then from stress to parent, and from parent to child. And that's not what we want. We actually want two separate indirect effects. So of course you can use this command, perhaps when you have a longer causal chain with multiple mediators as intermediaries. So I'm going to delete this statement here because this is not the effect we were looking for. So now we have our model, and we just have to discuss about this one last section here. In this last section, I have included things that I would like Mplus to produce in my output file. It has some things that it produces by default, but it is also nice to actually get some other things as extras. And depending on the models you have, you might choose different things. So the first thing I asked for here is standardized. The standardized command will give me standardized results, standardized coefficients. It's nice to have these because unstandardized coefficients are sometimes very difficult to interpret in terms of strength. Now Mplus has various ways to standardize results, depending on whether your predictors and outcomes are categorical or continuous. In our case, all variables are continuous, so in fact, instead of obtaining all of the different standardizations that I could get, which is what this command gives me, I'm going to choose just a subset, which is called stdyx. This means that the results that I obtain in standardized form will be standardized using the variance of both the outcome and the predictors. The next bit of output that I want to be given is called mod indices. This will produce a section in the output with suggestions for what other parts could be included to improve model fit if my model fit is originally bad. The number that I put in parentheses here is not usually necessary. You can just delete this bit, in which case you would be given suggestions for pathways that improve the model fit chi-square by at least 10 points. So it's basically like saying a 10 in parentheses. I instead use this value because this is the level at which that chi-square difference would be significant. But this is not something that you need to worry about just yet. We will talk about this later on in other models. Finally, for this model, I have requested confidence intervals. This is because reviewers often ask for confidence intervals for indirect effects. However, having said this, confidence intervals are actually produced for all coefficients, so you will also get confidence intervals for your regression paths, for example. And you might want to include those in your publications as well. Now, I think we are ready to run this model. So I'm going to click Run and see what happens. We have pressed Run, and we now have the Mplus output file. It kind of looks the same as the one before, doesn't it? It looks like it's just the input file and nothing happened. However, the commands are no longer in blue. So the reason this looks so similar to the input file is because the output file starts with a repeat of the input instructions.